This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. StoryBeat episodes are widely available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and numerous other podcast apps and platforms. So please take a moment to subscribe to StoryBeat wherever you listen to podcasts. Well, my guest today, Marley Sims, appeared on Broadway from 1971 until 1976 in two hit productions, The Me Nobody Knows and Godspell. While in Godspell, an accidental injury during a dance number forced her to stay off her feet for several months. While recuperating, she stretched her writing muscles and won a job on the staff of the fabled children's TV show Captain Kangaroo. She worked for the captain for 3 years. Later, in the 1980s and 90s, Marley worked in Hollywood, often as an actress, often as a writer. Her freelance writing work includes such shows as Archie Bunker's Place, Webster, Paper Chase, and Cheers. When she finally committed to writing full-time, she spent 7 years as a writer-producer on the Emmy-nominated hit family series Home Improvement, writing 23 episodes. Following that, she wrote and produced Sabrina the Teenage Witch for 2 years. Recently, a play that she wrote with Elliot Shoenman, Sunset Park, ran for 14 weeks at the Zephyr Theatre in Hollywood. The play has just been published by Samuel French. So for those reasons and many, many more, I'm greatly honored to welcome the extraordinarily talented actress and writer, Marley Sims, to StoryBeat today. Marley, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's very nice to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. So, all right, let's go all the way back to the beginning. How old were you when you first thought to yourself, you know what, this is kind of interesting, this acting and showbiz thing?
You know, I am one of those people that just walked into a life that I was totally unprepared for.
How so? How'd that work?
Because I studied nothing. And it is, I think, to my own detriment, what it adds up to is a lack of confidence that as you're reading my resume, I'm thinking, this person she's got something. But that's never how I feel because I didn't study anything. And so to me, when someone says, you know, should I go to school and learn how to, I say, absolutely go to school and learn how to do it. Because I learned it by accident. I learned to sing by listening to Barbra Streisand records.
Right.
I went to the same high school she did. Erasmus turned out, just a ton of us. We had the same music teacher. Everybody in Brooklyn sounds like Barbara.
Well, so Neil Diamond as well, yeah?
Yes, Neil Diamond. I don't know that he finished there, but I think she was and will always be the lead out to me.
Well,
Out of the borough, but all I did in terms of training was literally play Barbra Streisand records in my little dumpy apartment. And
so you must have had just innate talent. I mean, you didn't get on Broadway for 5 or 6 years by not having any ability.
Yeah, I mean, and I was sort of pushed into that. I did a favor for somebody who asked me to do a demo of a song they wrote. I did the demo. He took it to somebody. That somebody said, I hate the song, but who's singing?
So as an actress, then you were not writing at that time at all. That came later.
Yeah, no, I wasn't writing at all. I mean, that was also another accident. That was from the accident.
What triggered your desire to write? Though you could have done all kinds of things during the accident. You could have sat around and just ate popcorn all day. But why did you decide to write?
I didn't decide. I'm going to come out of this really screwy.
That's the way we like it. The screwier, the better.
The first play I did, The Me Nobody Knows, was literally all kids. So at 21, no, I was 22. I was the oldest person in the company. So I didn't know stage left from stage right. I had only done one local theater thing at that point. Um, the stage was raked. I had never been on a rake stage. I had, I think, 3 days of rehearsal before the person who I was understudying for said, "I'm sick. You need to go on." I'd never had a full cast rehearsal. So I just literally was thrown on stage, on stage. And all they said to me was, "You know what? The most important thing is just get the song out. The rest of the time, just go where people go."
And so it was literally, you were baptism by fire.
Yes, baptism by fire. And it was quite amazing. And the writing thing happened. By that time, I'd already been doing Godspell a while, and I was accidentally kicked in the kneecap by what turned out to be a very dear friend. He and I now bowl together. We've been bowling together on a team. When you could go into a building and see people, we may take up bowling in the street if it gets really bad.
Well, and just so everybody listening knows, we are talking in the time of COVID. Did you know when you did it at any juncture, you thought to yourself, I'm actually pretty good at this? Or did you always have doubt?
I think in hindsight, I can look and say, yeah, I was pretty good at it, but I just never quite believed it in the way I have now met people who weren't quite as good, but had such belief in themselves that they projected themselves into places where I thought, that person's there with chutzpah, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, all you have to do is watch a little bit of TV to know that there are people out there who are just doing it on a wing and a prayer.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to just walk into places. I mean, when I had that accident at Godspell, it was the understudy, who's a dear friend, the understudy, who often just sits backstage,
right?
Said, I have nothing to do. Do you ever think about writing something? And I thought, well, I've never written anything. What do you want to write? And he said, well, I've never written anything either. He wanted to write music. And Bob Garrett is his name. He's now a wonderful vocal coach here in Hollywood and still writes plays and things. But he said, why don't we write a Rhoda script? Because that's what was hot at the time.
Right.
I knew Rhoda. I certainly knew that character. I'd watched so many episodes. And we sat down and we wrote a script. I think it was 190 pages. It was the longest. You needed two people to lift it.
Tell the listeners how long a typical sitcom script should be. How many pages typically?
Well, you should be, 40, maybe, depending on whether it's film or tape but we had written a season in one episode.
So in other words, your spec was a little long.
It was a little long, and a lot heavy.
How did you get people to read it?
Well, Bob, who is a hustler from Hustlerville, and this to me is my biggest piece of advice, so I'll save it for later. He said, my sister has a woman, she knows somebody who lives next door to a guy who knows somebody who drives a car that they bring to a place, and he's a new agent at Walmart. And I'm gonna give it to him. And that's what Bob did. Bob took it to this person, and he read it, and he literally called and said, I'm brand new here. Have you ever seen a sitcom script? And we said, not really. And he said, there's some very funny things in here, but he handed us a script and said, this is what you need to bring this down to.
Your career beginning is like a sitcom.
It is a sitcom. I just hope my ending is not a sitcom.
I don't know. I'd rather my ending was a sitcom. I don't want it to be a drama.
I don't, yeah.
I want to go out laughing whenever that is. I hope 100 years from now, but I want to go out laughing. All right. So you just fell into deciding to write. That just happened.
It just happened.
And so you have no training in that at all other than doing it.
Yeah. Even less training there because I didn't stay home and just write stuff like I did practice singing to Barbara records.
There are probably a pretty significant number of people in Hollywood that would tear off their right arm for that, to just be able to waltz into it like that.
I know, and it is also at the core of what makes me so still, as you know, speak of my career, just a little insecure about why. I keep thinking, geez, what if I had the training? The only training I had was I was a horrible student in school, horrible high school student.
Mhm.
Because only myself or my brother were going to go to college, and it was going to be the boy. And he was a great student with no work. I slaved and I still got B's and C's. So eventually, some point, the people at high school said, you know what, she's not a brain trust here. You better teach her how to type and do bookkeeping. And that's what I was taught to do in high school. I took no science, I took no math, but I learned how to type and do shorthand. And I was a really good typist. So that was the only preparation I was. I didn't know what to do with it, but I could type.
I believe in education. I teach. I've been teaching for almost 10 years. And I truly believe in people going to school to learn these things. But I also know that the business that you've been in all these years, that I've been in for a long time, does not require it. It's not you don't need a degree in order to succeed in show business. So not only did you manage to find your way into the business, but you did it with no education. So I don't want to discourage people from going to school to learn these things, but it is possible to actually have a successful career with no training of any kind. That's the beauty of show business, is that you can do it.
Yeah. And now I understand why there are people who just say, I'm killing myself here in college. I know I can do this. I've been writing. I'm just going to get out and give it a shot.
Well, of course, a huge amount of it is luck. You were very lucky in many ways, clearly, and because you were not making an effort to find your way to it; it found you.
Eventually, once, because how I made my living was as a secretary. I was working at a brokerage firm, and once I started, I think once I got theater work, I was always still looking at the want ads just in case.
Oh, well.
If this show folds, can I get a job typing?
Do you know any jobs in the entertainment industry that are secure? No.
No, but that was my fear, was I've now put myself in a place where, what if this show closes?
Right,
and
sure.
The truth, I think it's why I stayed so long at the fair. Once I got into a show, I'm there. I'm not leaving.
Unless the show leaves, which happens.
Unless the show leaves. But, by the time I had Godspell under my belt, I toured with, the wonderful thing about The Me Nobody Knows was I was so young. And after it did close on Broadway, I went on tour with it. Not on a bus and truck, but staying for months at a time to really learn what theater was. That's how I really learned it. And writing was the same thing. I learned it, I can't say by Captain Kangaroo, because it was little skits that we wrote. Bob and I wrote little skits.
Well, it's still writing. You still have to figure it's little storytelling of some sort.
Oh, absolutely. And they were, they knew what they wanted. So you really did have to figure out. I mean, at some point, one of the things that always made me laugh was we took a meeting and they said, Mr. Moose wouldn't say that. And I thought, Mr. Moose is a glove. What do you mean he wants? What do you mean he wants?
All right. So how you were working in the theater when you got you hurt yourself and then you got the Captain Kangaroo job.
Captain Kangaroo job. And
that was your first writing job, right?
That was my first writing job. Bob Garrett and I did that together, and it was his pushiness and this agent who said eventually, when we got the script down to a normal size, I think you guys are talented. And we just said, so sign us. And he said, I'm new here myself. I don't know what you guys can do yet. And within a matter of months, he said, they're looking for two writers on Captain Kangaroo. And Bob and I said, well, we'll go.
Sure. You'll take, at that point in almost anybody's career, you take a job to learn the job.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're not throwing your weight around at anybody. You're taking a job because you're trying to figure out how to make your bones. All right, so I have to ask you about Captain Kangaroo. I can't not, because I was a fan of Captain Kangaroo as a kid. I love Mr. Green Jeans and Captain Kangaroo and all that. I'm talking about when I was a kid. And so I have to know, what was Bob Keeshan like without all without the coat? And I assume that was a wig.
Yeah, and that was a wig. Yeah.
What was he
Padding, too.
what was he like behind the scenes? Are you able to say anything?
So I wish I had more contact than I did. The writers, at least we did, because we were newbies, wrote at home.
Oh, really?
And our one opportunity to go see something we had done shot was not very pleasant. And so we continued to stay home and write.
Wow.
But, I watched him too growing up. I was astounded. I thought, this man must be 700 years old. How could he still be here?
No kidding.
I watched him as a kid.
What years was that, Marley?
So it was 78.
78. So that was somewhat later in their run.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. But it was still the same group. It was still Mr. Green Jeans, who...
Lumpy Branham. I've never forgotten that name. Lumpy Branham played Mr. Green Jeans.
Very, very. I mean, they were just... We had, I think, 2 occasions where we actually met everybody. There was a group picture that got taken, and we finally got to introduce ourselves. And Gus Allegretti, who was also a lovely man, whose career was grandfather clock, which, he was married to Carol Lawrence. When I found that out, I thought that was quite amazing.
Oh, he was married to Carol Lawrence?
Carol Lawrence was married to grandfather clock. But my experience with Bob Keeshan was really very limited. And, we would get notes. We dealt mostly with the head. I can't even remember his name. It was Jim something. I cannot.
And I assume you were, because that was a daily show, right? That was 5 days a week.
Yeah, it was 5 days a week. They gave us a tryout and said, well, write a couple. What they really did is this is another thing. They showed us a typical episode, Bob and I, before they hired us, and said, what do you think? And because we were so new and so young and probably stupid, we said, well, it wasn't very good. And the producer at the time said, well, can you fix it? And I don't know. I don't know that we could make it worse. So we started writing sketches, and they eventually said, okay, you're on. So yes. And then at some point we were still on the books and Godspell, and we were making, I don't know what the figure was, but it was under $200 a week take home pay.
To be in Godspell at the same time you were writing Captain Kangaroo.
On Broadway. I don't think we were taking home, if it was $250 a week. And we were in a meeting, and we kind of looked at each other and thought, I don't know what this pays. We don't know. And they said, well, you're going to have to, we don't have a lot of money here. It's a kid's show. You're going to have to split 18. And we kind of looked at each other and thought, it can't be $18. Was there $9 an episode? We literally could not wrap our heads around what 18 possibly could mean. And as soon as we found out, it had 2 zeros behind it. I think we quit Godspell so fast that your head was spin. That was the most money either one of us had ever made in our life.
Did you ever regret not being on Broadway at that point?
No, at that point, I had done Godspell a long time. I'd done it off Broadway, which was wonderful. And when we moved to Broadway, that was a very harrowing experience, because everybody wanted to be in the Broadway company, and nobody knew who was going to get chosen. They now had 1 million companies, and they could pick from every company they wanted, from every country, from every, and when I got picked, I thought, there's no way I'm leaving. And so I stayed with that for another, maybe 3 years.
At some point, when did you move out to Hollywood? When did that happen?
The second year of Captain Kangaroo, our stage manager from Godspell was now a casting person in Hollywood. His name was Sam Christensen, who was one of the most beloved friends I have. Mm-hmm. And then I did come out here. He did casting for MASH, and he and Joyce Robinson had a very successful casting company. And he said, if you come to Hollywood, I will help you get acting work.
Wow.
I'd never been to California. I was slightly agoraphobic. I was afraid to fly. But he insisted, come out. We'll help you. I'll help you get an agent. I'll help. So Bob and I had written 2 years in New York on Captain Kangaroo. They wanted us to do a 3rd year. And Bob said, how are we going to do that if you leave? And I said, I don't know, but Sam says go, and I'm going. So I left for California, and Bob and I wrote the 3rd season over the phone because there were no computers at that point.
Yeah, no computers then, for sure.
It literally was, hold on, I'm typing with my neck crooked to one side for a year while we finished.
Wow.
It was an insane, and I kept saying to Bob, you come out, you can get work here. And he had an apartment, he didn't want to leave. And
so once again, I mean, you're giving us links in the chain of your career. And once again, somebody's just helping you. You didn't even make any effort really to get this contact.
Depress me,
Huh?
You're starting to depress me.
No. I think it's fantastic. I wish that, it would be great if everybody could go through that. But I'm saying you were basically said by someone, come out to LA, I'll help you.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen very often.
No. And it's,
the one thing I don't want listeners to get the impression of is that it's really easy.
Yeah, no.
It's not easy.
When you're talking, I have been lucky in again, I'm hanging on to the same sentence that when I talk about this with other people, I had to back it up with something, and that's what I need to remind myself.
Sure. Well, clearly you have
the talent had to be there, whether I believed in myself or not.
100%.
That it had to be there. So, when I do tend to just sort of, write myself off in that way. Well, I got lucky, but it was more. You
didn't keep your career on luck. You kept your career on talent. So that had to be there. So, nobody was being nice to you to keep you for 7 years on Home Improvement. It's because you were making your way through it in a way that everybody liked. By the way, I'm curious, did you just totally give up acting at some point, or did you keep doing little bits and pieces?
When we got Captain Kangaroo, I thought, this is it. I don't have to. I found auditioning very painful.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it was on the same day you could be too tall, too short, too fat, too skinny, too Jewish, not Jewish enough. And I was always nervous about it.
Yeah.
And so the writing to me brought me the same feeling about, wow, I love this, and I can do it in my pajamas. And there was something freeing about just being able, and there was restructured. I loved the structure of it, partly because I had a partner, which I have always had in my career. So,
and we're going to talk about partnership and collaboration here in a bit. But all right, so how long was it before you got your first writing job in LA? How long had you been out there before you picked something up?
It was a while, because when Sam brought me out here, he didn't bring me out as a writer. He brought me out as an actor.
Mm-hmm.
What he thought I'd be sitcom, doing sitcoms. And in fact, I never got a sitcom. The acting work I wound up getting was all sort of comedy roles in dramas.
Huh.
And so that, I don't know, I think I sort of at that point missed the writing. Bob and I were no longer writing together. We thought, well, Captain Kangaroo is over. He's still in New York. I'm, not sure what to do next. That was a sort of not sure what to do next. And that is where I wound up finding another writing partner through an old Godspell friend, who said, I have a friend who wants to write a play, a movie. It was a movie. And do you want to do it with him? And I thought, well, I got nothing else going. I'd now moved out here.
Right.
And wasn't sure what to do with myself. I didn't have a lot of money banked. And I started working with this writer who's since passed, who was wonderful, named Stephen Schneck. And we wrote this play together, this movie together. It was a movie. We thought it could have been a play. And it was through that I thought, okay, it sort of got me juiced up again to try and do some writing. And through that, I wound up meeting Fred at a party.
Okay.
And Fred was doing Archie Bunker.
So we need to stop and explain who Fred is, which we'll do. Fred Rubin you've been with Fred for how many years now?
Well, since 1982.
Okay, so you've been with Fred almost 40 years, and Fred's going to also be a guest on the show on another day. And Fred, I've known from my days as a graduate student at UCLA. So that's who Fred is. I just wanted to, so the audience knows who Fred is when you mentioned Fred.
Yeah, because he's a big factor here. This was
Sure.
Lucky on many counts.
So you met Fred at a party, not on a show.
I met Fred at a party through Stephen Schneck, who said, I have a friend he's a producer on Archie Bunker. And we should go meet him because maybe we could get an episode of Archie Bunker.
Right.
I didn't want to go to the party. I didn't want to go. He said, come with me. Fred tells this story better than I do. But eventually I met Fred and we wound up going in to pitch ideas for Archie Bunker. And we wound up getting 2 episodes. And a husband, as it turns out. But the episodes were first. We didn't date while we were working.
So there's a continued theme here. You continued to luck into things. Yes. You lucked into Fred on top of it.
I did. I lucked into Fred. And from what I understand now, we sort of had a little crush on each other. But he was at this party with another woman, and I thought, not doing that. But we did eventually find each other, and he has some pretty cute stories about the crush he had, and so that happened. Fred encouraged me always to write by myself. Schneck and I wrote a couple of episodes of Archie, and then Fred moved on to Webster, and we got a couple of more episodes. And so, we were not just handed these episodes, but we had an entree into shows that were successful at the time because I was married or dating to this person.
And at the same time, you were suddenly actually making serious money because sitcom writing paid.
Yeah, and enjoying it, and really enjoying it.
Mm-hmm.
Not missing the acting at all at that point anymore. I had done a couple of things through Sam. A couple of nice acting parts, but they just, the feeling of the nervousness and the writing just seemed more stable to me. I mean, I guess of the 2 things, the writing, at least in the careers I had, certainly with Captain Kangaroo, was 3 years. That's a nice job.
That's a nice job. Sure. That's a great job. And like you say, with the writing, you don't have to get all dolled up. You don't have to worry about the way you look that day. Though, to a certain extent you do, but not really, not compared to being an actor.
Also, the rejection of it felt different. It's like you are putting your heart and soul into this, regardless of what the show is. I don't care how good or bad it is. You're putting your blood on that piece of paper. And when you sit around the table and someone says, I don't get it, somehow or another, I could take it better as a writer than I could my face.
Well, it's less personal.
It's less personal, even though that's your words.
Well, it's your blood, sweat, and tears that's on that page. But somehow, once it's on the page, it's slightly dispossessed from you.
Yeah.
Whereas your face is your face, and you can't take it off and change it.
And there are people who will fight to the death for any change you make in a script.
Sure.
I certainly being on staff now, all those years, I just stopped taking it personally at all, because you just want the script to be the best script it can be.
And you develop a thick skin in many different ways.
Yeah.
If you don't, you won't succeed at that either. It's just like acting in that sense, where you have to have a thick skin for it, or it won't work. You can't take it. All right, so let's talk about sitcom writing, because that's clearly where you've made your bread and butter for a long time. How long was it before you got onto your first fully staffed gig?
My first fully staffed gig was the best job I ever had, because I did it for 2 weeks, and the person that hired me and yet another writing partner who I wrote with for a little while got fired. And so they had to, it was I'm trying to think of what it was. It was a Mayim Bialik show, and it was before Blossom.
Huh. Okay.
I'm losing the name of, but the person that hired us, we were two young mommies, and we were so stressed out about taking a full-time job, and what would this mean? And how are we going to do this? We had small kids, almost exactly the same age. And Fred encouraged me and said, take it, we'll figure it out. Just take the job. We took the job. I think we wrote half an episode. The person who hired us got fired, and they paid us off for 13 episodes, and we never wrote a thing.
Wow.
But I was sorry in a way, because I really was looking forward to it. I wanted to know, what is that experience going to be like?
Was it frightening at the time that you were let go, that would get around somehow, that you were someone that was not worthy of keeping? I mean, that's you always fear that potential that people think something that isn't true.
Well, I was so still naive in that way about, I had no name at that point.
Right.
I was still freelancing. I had an agent now. But I was so removed from that. We didn't even meet with the new people. I mean, we literally were told they're bringing in their own people. Everybody was gone. So that was a lesson. You realize who you know and who you continue to have relationships with is a big factor.
Sure.
In business. And, there are costs to that. I think I paid a price for that, for having stayed at Home Improvement so long, that the only people I knew were Home Improvement people.
Sure.
Other people that when they started, the show was a huge hit when it started, stayed for, 2 years and moved on to higher paying jobs, new titles. For me, this was a job that worked so well in my life because I was a mom. And I think that will, for me, the focus of writing and being a mom is not something necessarily men have to deal with, even in this day and age.
Well, and it's steady and regular, and in your where you live, it's in your town. You don't have to travel for the job. You're not out on location in another country or something like that.
Yeah, but it is, it's certainly that first year of Home Improvement, the hours were unbelievable. I was never home. I just was not home. And that was really painful. And again, this is a story been told so many times among us. The first year of Home Improvement was very stressful because it was a brand new show. It was a hit out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
And the network is just on top of you 24/7. And the three guys that were running the show, Matt, David, and Carmen, they wanted everything to be right. And so we were there sometimes for hours and hours and hours until the middle of the night.
And how did you feel about that when you were there as a mom, your child's at home?
I was really unhappy. It was a very tough time for Fred and I because Fred was in development at the time. So he was home. He was here at night. And our daughter was fine because Daddy was here. I never realized how depressed I would get that I wasn't there.
Right.
But I was missing every school thing, and she was 6 at the time, just turned almost 7. And that was painful. And
you didn't think about walking away at any point, did you?
Well, I didn't have to think about it because I was fired. So I think the 3 guys in charge, who I will always be grateful to, although at the end of that first year, I don't know that that's what I was feeling. I had worked my ass off, and I think they felt like what they had done was they had hired so many novice writers, and that was part of the problem why we were there so long. There weren't enough high-end people.
Interesting.
And so they got rid of a lot of the below-the-line people, and I was one of them. But they liked me so much. I was always there in the middle of the night. There were people who were consulting producers and with better titles. I was a story editor who went home at 6 o'clock. I was there partly because I was a mom. I had a child the same age as the kids in the show. I really was a good woman's perspective. But when they let me go, the show was a huge hit. I was devastated, even though I knew, I don't know that I could survive another year of that. what they wound up doing was recommending me to another show. And I realized at that point, and I said to my agent, I can't do full time. It will kill me. It will kill my life. I can't do it.
So you went back to freelancing again?
I know I took that job on a new show. It was called, I'll remember it, Camp Wilder.
Camp Wilder.
Yeah, it had an unbelievable cast of people. Didn't last but 13 episodes. But on that show, the other consulting producer was Elliot Shoenman.
Mm.
And Elliot and I got along great. We both from New York. We were old cranky Jews. We just, it was a match made in heaven. And we were both consulting. And again, in a history of luck, by the third year of Home Improvement, so I did the first year, I did not do the second year. The show is still just number one. Matt, David, and Carmen decided they just wanted to be titular heads of this show. They needed a really good showrunner. Who did they call? Elliot Shoenman, who had hired those guys, who had hired, I think, not David, but Matt and Carmen for their first big job, which is The Cosby Show. Elliot he was the executive producer of Cosby in New York, hired Matt and Carmen. So they loved Elliot, and they knew he could really run a show. And they said, please come back and run Home Improvement. And, he made a lovely deal. And he said, come back to Home Improvement. And
to you.
To me, come back to Home Improvement. And I said, I have such bad feelings about how they let me go that I don't know that I could do it. It was painful. And in a way, he said, well, what can we do to make that happen? And I said, they have to want me back. I don't want to, they let me go. And I wound up meeting with David, which was McFadzean, and he was amazing. They were all amazing. They all said, look, it was never you. We loved you. We loved your work. Come back. And
well, there you go. So that's what the difference was, is you found out it wasn't personal.
Yeah.
There was a business decision made.
Right.
They still liked you as a person and your work. But that's really hard as a writer to figure out sometimes, because frequently you're not told those things.
No. And I think I knew it in my heart just because of how hard I had worked. And that's why the pain was so bad.
Of course.
And then again, they also recommended me to another show. They weren't saying this woman can't write. They were saying,
exactly,
take her, she's great, but she's at the bottom here. She's new, she's new. I couldn't run a room. They were looking for people who, had more gravitas than I did.
They were looking for someone to take over for them when they got burnt out.
Yeah, exactly. And
yeah,
Elliot
sure.
was that person. And so Elliot, to this day, we've gone on to do amazing things together. He really showed me where he taught me story. That was a place where I was sort of lacking. And he just he's amazing. And we worked, it was a marriage. It was a marriage for 7 years. We started writing together.
Mm-hmm.
As the executive producer, he didn't want to just sit in a room by himself and do it. And I was thrilled to have another partner. And heck, if you can write with the boss, what's better?
Sure.
What's better than that? He's not going to say, you know what? I don't like this.
What's more important? And I think I know the answer, but what's more important to you, story, character, or jokes?
Well, it's got to be story, and it's got to be, I think the jokes come last to me. If you don't have a good story and good characters, I don't know what story you're telling.
And how important is conflict in a comedy?
You don't have comedy without it.
There you go.
You just don't have comedy without it. Because Fred and I at one point worked in Denmark together. And this is really, he got this job to try and teach them to write their own sitcoms, because they were just bringing stuff in. And when we were in Denmark, you realized there is no conflict in Denmark. We'll work it out. Well, that's not funny. You had a big fight with your wife, and then we made up. What was the fight about? Oh, a stupid thing. Nothing. You know, so I mean, you just, conflict is everything.
All humans care about are people in conflict with other people, characters in conflict with characters. That's all people care about.
Yeah. And I think the humor comes from really good character development. Who is this person? What makes this person funny or quirky?
So then the question then is the character should drive the story, not the story driving the character, correct?
Well, I think it's a combo, because when you read something on a page, like you're reading a pilot of something, you're just reading words. You're reading a story. Who the actor walks in the room brings some of that with them.
Sure.
You know, and as an actor, that again was a revelation to me, that all those rejections I got really sometimes had nothing to do with me.
No, nothing.
In the same way the losing the home improvement job year one was. It really didn't have anything to do with me. I was picturing someone who didn't look like my mother-in-law, and that's who just walked in the door. That person's not getting the job.
Right.
You know, I think what you struggle with, and we used to struggle with it too, was she's just a mom. What makes her more than just a mom?
You gotta know some kind of depth to a character, or it's just cardboard.
Yeah. Yeah. And what makes, not every mom is the same. But if you look at a lot of old sitcoms, you know, sometimes, well, that's what they were. They were sort of an addendum character in the background.
Do you feel as if your whatever you put into, because I know you weren't trained, but you had training by doing it as an actress, how much impact did that have eventually on the writing? Did you understand the writing better by having been an actress?
I think so. I knew, first of all, I knew initially if I can't say the line, there's something wrong with the line.
Yep.
And in writing, when Elliot and I would struggle with something, I would think, if I was an actor, why is this not working? I mean, I would go back and think, why is this, it's just not flowing. It's not flowing. This sentence to this sentence isn't happening. And it was the beauty of how Elliot and I worked together, is that we would just know this, literally, we're struggling too much with it. Let's go back and find out why this is not okay.
Would you eventually know while you were writing it that something would work on stage?
Yeah, I think you really, you know, and there were certainly tweaks to be had at table reading.
Of course.
Yet again, and then sometimes you'd have to change things that you knew worked, but it wasn't making somebody else happy.
Right.
You know, Elliot, again, he was the showrunner for the rest of the, not the total run, because Bruce wound up, he handed the show to Bruce.
So we're talking now about Bruce Ferber, who's been a guest on StoryBeat, who eventually ran a home improvement for, how many years did Bruce run it?
You know, I want to say 3.
Three years. But if anybody is listening and wants to check out another person who was instrumental in the life of home improvement, check out Bruce Ferber's episode, because he talks all about it.
They were great showrunners. All of the guys from the very beginning to Elliot and Bruce were great showrunners. They knew how to spread out the work. You know, I learned everything. I learned what you do in editing. I went to casting. Elliot was the kind of showrunner who wanted you to just be out there, know your script, be a part, whatever was happening, go check out the costumes. You know, he was wonderful in that way.
All right, so let's talk about the process of actually working on the show. Most comedies are famously written around a table. That you have to break stories. You've got to, at some point, you've got to go off in a room and write a script to start with. Yeah. But most shows are finished off, if not rewritten entirely, around a table with a bunch of people, correct?
Yes, they are.
So how does that work? Explain from your perspective what the room is like.
Well, it's the one thing I probably miss more than anything, was being around that table, because for one thing, I mean, once your script is done, and we would sometimes, if we would get stuck, we would just go down the hall and say to somebody, what do you think here? We're having struggles, but everybody got around a table for the season and determined what's the arc of this show. And you have a show that's running this long. Who are these characters? Where do we want to see them at the end of the year? And so we had that pretty much known as we'd start a season.
Mm-hmm.
And then we divvy up scripts, who's taking the holiday show, who's taking this. They try and spread it out so everybody got a fair amount of scripts. And then when it was our turn to write, you sit down, everybody would break the story together. Everybody would have their input. And then Elliot and I would go off and write a more in-depth story outline.
How many writers at the time? How many were around the table?
I want to say there were 8.
8. So it's a chunk
8.
Of people.
It's a lot of people. Again, from initially being a woman around the table, there were not many. There were more. Elliot hired more. Bruce hired more. I had a hard time speaking up in the beginning. You've got some very loud, powerful men around the table. And it was like that. And did you ever see My Favorite Year?
Yes.
The character that just kept whispering to the person next to them, and then that person would pitch the joke.
You know who that character was, don't you? That was Neil Simon.
Oh, was it?
That was based on Neil Simon. Yeah.
That he was the character that was whispering?
Yeah. Okay, Neil Simon.
You know what? I did not know that. I didn't know that.
He was the shy one in the room.
Huh. Yeah, well, that was me, and I'm not normally a shy person, but there was something about all that voice and
all that male energy and all that them pushing at you, because that's what I as I know from many people in many different writing rooms, it's usually the loudest person sort of prevails.
Yes, and we had some loud ones. I mean, we had some really loud ones and some really funny ones, and I think not just speaking up because you would have to be loud to be heard. It was also, what if I pitch this and nobody laughs? And so that sort of became, you'd have to pitch it like you were doing it. You had to sell it. You couldn't just.
Oh yeah, you can't just say it. It has to be. You have to say it like it. You have to deliver the line like it's going to get a laugh.
Yeah, which is where acting did come in handy. And eventually I found my voice and was able to do it. And then when you pitch the joke and it just dies, everybody just laughs, because that stinks.
You tell me I'm wrong. I have a sneaky feeling that in a room, you were the one who kind of zinged at the very end of people trying to figure something out. You'd slip something in at the end that was the topper. Am I right?
Well, we had a whole table full of those people.
Mm-hmm.
We really did. We had some creme de la creme around that table of because eventually, whether it's your name on the script or not, you want the best joke you could get at the table. Sure. With the actors and on TV. And if somebody else had the funniest punchline, fine, you'll give that to somebody else on their script. So there really was this commonality of, let's just make this as good as we can make it.
So would you go to the table before a table read with the actors, or would you only go after you'd had a table read to see how it plays?
No, we never had a table read before the table read. I mean, everybody knew it, everybody read it, everybody gave their notes, so that by the time we went to the table, we were certain as the writers, this was as good as it's going to get.
Yeah.
Until the actors got to it. And then the pens would fly. It's just, and the network would have notes. I mean, I didn't have to deal with it because I wasn't Elliot or, Matt, David, and Carmen, who I think in the beginning really were inundated with network stuff because it was new and it was a hit. As the show really just sort of stabilized in terms of where it was in the top 10, they didn't give as many notes. The actors gave notes.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I doing this? I'd rather do this. And you have a comedian. Tim Allen was a comedian, and so on his feet would sometimes just come up with stuff that was funny and better.
Well, and in that case, even more importantly, it was based on sort of his act anyway.
Absolutely. So he knew that character. It was his idea, I think, initially to have the character, well, not the character behind the fence. Initially, he didn't want anybody there. He wanted to go to the fence and talk to nobody, which I think the boys talked him out of, which
a good idea.
A good idea, because then you're nuts. So they put Earl behind the fence, and that wound up being sort of a formula. That and Tool Time, it was very formulaic. We knew we had to hit certain certain beats and
So how important is the chemistry in the room? If the assembled writers aren't, have you ever been in a room where they're not working well together?
Yeah, there have been some people who have been in the room that have made it unpleasant for other people.
Mm-hmm. So that chemistry is really important to the outcome of the script, isn't it?
I think so. I really do, because it's a family. You're spending
More time with them than with your actual family.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even as a consultant, that's 3 days a week. You're there from, maybe 10 in the morning till 8, 9 o'clock at night.
Mm-hmm.
Taping night, I was there, and I'd come to tape night too. And as a consultant, I didn't have, I wasn't there 24/7 anymore. But in a show like Home Improvement, everything we did was relationship driven between this married couple and their kids. And all of us around the table had, I think with the exception of one writer, had children. We all were married, and we would bring all of our own stuff. But we laughed about it, and we would have arguments with our spouses, and we put them in the script. And Fred would always say, on TV, I would win the argument. At home, not always, but on TV, I would win that argument.
Right, sure.
Because I could write the ending I wanted.
Well, sure. All right, so let's talk about collaboration. I know we alluded to that earlier in the show. You have had a series of collaborations throughout your career, and sort of ending on Home Improvement with Elliot, or did you keep working on other shows with Elliot?
No, Elliot and I wrote a play together.
A play.
That play, which was really probably one of the more special things I've ever done.
All right. So what is it? It's notorious that sitcom writers have a tendency to be in pairs. There are solo acts in sitcom writing. There are less pairs in hour-long drama writing, but sitcoms are filled with teams of two. What is it? Why is that prevalent there? What is important about collaboration in comedy?
Well, I think because I did come into Home Improvement with a script I wrote myself. Wrote a script I wrote myself and was expecting to do this myself. But the three guys wanted people. They felt they could get a better product, I think, pairing people off. So Elliot and I wound up writing together because that was the suggestion, was why don't you two write together? And Roz and Howard wrote together. I think for me, it was a dream come true to just have that be, because I do work better as a collaborator. For one thing, the process of writing I find so painful.
So what does having the collaborator do for you?
It's just a way to bounce off the ideas, bounce off it came so easily to Elliot and I think he would say the same thing, although he wrote without me way more after me. He wrote more plays, but I think we highlighted each other's strengths. And in the beginning, I don't think story was my strength. It was his strength. I think I had funny dialogue. And sometimes we'd have to cut me off to get back to the story. To the story. Sure. And I think that was true in a lot of the collaborations. And it was faster. You'd go in a room with another person, and in 7-10 days, you'd have a finished script.
You surely found it easier, like you say, to bounce stuff off of, to then not walk away from whatever you're working on unsure whether something is going to work for anyone else. But if you're working in a team or around a table, you're getting instant feedback. Yeah, that works. No, that doesn't work. Or if we tweaked it this way or that way, you're getting that kind of feedback, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I've had collaborations with people where it wasn't that smooth. Elliot and I agreed 99% of the time on what the problem was, or does this work or not work. When you have problems around a table or in a comedy room, it's with the person that sometimes is very unpleasant about how they might give a note, which is, there's a kind of a kindness. You're around a table with people. This was something people did. Why be a jerk? No script is just all awful, so I think there's ways to give notes that are damning and ways to give notes that are constructive. So being around a table, you're putting it out there. You're handing out 8 copies of a script that, everybody knew what the story was because they helped create it.
All right. So I love the thoughts about how people deal with notes. So you've received lots of notes in your life as well.
Sure.
What is your methodology for receiving a note from, whether it's from the studio, the executive, some executive, the network, or your partners even? What is your thought process, or how do you handle a note that is just completely wrong? Are you blunt about it? Are you diplomatic about it? How do you tend to handle those things?
Well, I think I probably got stronger as I got more secure about what I was doing. And I think innately I would know that note I'm getting is it's a lateral note. It's this person sometimes just needs to have their voice in your script.
Mm-hmm.
And just give it up. I mean, at some point, how much are you going to go to the carpet for it? I would fight for the stuff that I knew 100%, you are wrong. This is a better joke, or this is it's clean this way. And, I think it's a question of respecting okay, that person's going to let it go, or you're going to let it go. Somebody's going to let it go. So, and I think the way a table works the best is when people just trust each other.
So some of it is learning, and you have to learn it, when and where to pick your battles too.
Absolutely.
And it's a little bit like a marriage, isn't it?
Well, yeah, parenting. At some point early on, somebody said to me, you're going to argue over everything they eat or don't eat, or wear or don't wear. Give it up. There's going to be much bigger things. And
so everybody knows this old adage that, dying is easy, comedy is hard. So this is a difficult question because I don't know that there's a good answer for it. But what do you think makes comedy work?
It's different for everybody. What makes Fred laugh doesn't always make me laugh. He watches stuff that it's much more, I would say, Three Stooges kind of stuff. I never found that funny. I never found we used to laugh at Home Improvement, but guys would find that funny and women would just think, what morons, so I think it is different for everybody.
Slapstick. You don't like slapstick, right?
I'm not a big slapstick fan.
Do you like the Marx Brothers?
I did like the Marx Brothers because I think their wordplay topped their slapstick.
Yeah, I agree.
The Three Stooges were, I can't do that thing that guys were doing. That to me is not a punchline. But
you did it pretty well right there.
But they had everything to me, the Marx Brothers. Their humor was so on the page funny that it made the slapstick funny.
Everything was topped by both visual and verbal.
Yeah, brilliant.
As opposed to the Three Stooges, which was almost entirely visual.
Yeah,
and it's sort of a totally different style of things. It's still three guys doing sort of wild, zany things, but the Marx Brothers had it at a different level than the Three Stooges. At least for me, they did. I feel the same way about Chaplin and Keaton. So I'm not a huge fan of Chaplin, but I love Keaton, and people think the reverse. It just depends upon your taste, I guess.
Yeah, and I sort of like them both too. I think there was also I grew up with Abbott and Costello, which I didn't like them either. I didn't like them because I always felt sorry for Costello.
Yeah.
I just once somebody is being abused, it ceases to be funny to me. He was always being abused.
Sure, but that was also good verbal and visual too. They weren't slapping themselves around, but the verbal was amazing.
Oh yeah.
And same thing for Laurel and Hardy. That was both verbal and visual.
Yeah. And we grew up with some great stuff. I mean, I grew up addicted to Lucy, and I think that timing was just there. It was inbred in me, I think.
Were you a big Lucy fan?
Oh yeah, big Lucy fan.
Do you think that translated up into the work that you did?
I think I was always funny, but there was something about almost the rhythm of her that I think somehow seeped into my pores.
Were you the person in school that made people laugh?
It was a very small circle of people I made laugh, and they all knew how to type.
Well, here's what I definitely know, that, you know, I follow Fred on Facebook. I see all of Fred's stuff on Facebook, and he is constantly posting hilarious things that you say.
He is a very kind man.
Oh, but you can tell they're hilarious. He posts them; they're hilarious. So you're just a natural at it. You didn't train for it. You just do it.
No. And I wish I had. If I had to do it over again, I think I would still say, gee, it would have been nice to have expanded what I know and had more confidence in it.
It has to be that you have a skewed outlook on life itself. It has to be you see life differently than the average bear.
Yeah, and I automatically will see something funny that maybe somebody else didn't see, and I don't know where that comes from. It's
there.
I mean, I truly didn't learn that, and I know I did it with teachers in school. You'd just see that thing that would, you know, I would say that thing that you saw that. How come you didn't say that?
Exactly. Well,
didn't see it, didn't register, and that is, you know, that is the gift. If I had a gift, that was the gift.
And then you get in a show, you get to sit around a table with a bunch of people with that gift.
Oh, that I can't even tell you, when even at its craziest, to be around a table with that many funny people, and just because you'd start the day with food on the table and people getting you food and just talking about what people did last night. I mean, I looked forward to it because it was mostly men. They talk sports. I didn't know a whole lot about a lot of sports, but I would look forward to it. And I found myself missing it when it was gone. And then who fought with who? Who had a fight with their wife last night? And how can we use this? So
you were
it was very raw and open. We had dialogue there. You can't, you know, I know there were lawsuits from some shows where they were saying the things that got said around the table. It all has to be out there. I wasn't offended by any of it. I gave as good as I got. You know, nobody was going to abuse anybody else. It was just what you talked about, what happened in your world, in your life.
I think that's part of the problem today, is that there are so many people that are trying to be politically correct that sometimes they stifle the great stuff that they're thinking because they don't want to be perceived as someone who's in any way, shape, or form mean-spirited or abusive or whatever. And then the great stuff doesn't come out, because from those maybe hideous remarks come the great things that actually work.
I think it would be I think what you're saying is absolutely true. I think it would be very hard to be around the table. I mean, everybody's taking back the fat episode of this or it's, you had freedom to be able to say anything. And no, I said it. Did it hurt somebody? Probably did.
I agree totally. And I have my own particular, and I'm sure it's shared by others, viewpoint on it, that I understand and respect that sometimes the words are very hurtful and things need to change over time. But I don't think in my opinion, you can't throw out what was of its time and in an era and just literally dismiss it whole cloth. It is part and parcel of where we are today. So you don't get to today without what happened yesterday, and yesterday may be painful in today's world, but you shouldn't be able to throw it away. I mean, you shouldn't throw away all of Picasso because he was a womanizer.
Right.
You know, it's that kind of thing. That's how I look. Well, Marley, we've been talking for almost an hour, if you can believe it. And,
well,
and so I'm gonna give you the last two questions, the standard last two questions on StoryBeat. You've obviously been around quite a while, and you've met plenty of people in the business. Do you happen to have a quirky or offbeat or oddball or strange or just plain funny story you can share?
You know, in keeping with with inappropriate stuff, how far back inappropriate went. And during the very first year of Home Improvement, when we were there, literally sometimes I would leave 3 o'clock in the morning, and the prop man named Warren would be coming in.
Oh, God.
And it was it was crazy. So we would get blitzed around that table. Nothing you write at 2:00 in the morning is going to be in the script the next.
No.
But we were just wackadoo. I mean, we were wackadoo. And at some point, one of the consultants, he was a consultant. I don't know what he was, what his title was. I can't remember anymore. But he, at about 3:00 in the morning, Wen said, "I've got to go to the bathroom." And when he came out, he literally was just wearing his boxer shorts.
Oh.
I'm going to bed. And to this day, it's still in my head as, first of all, if he did that today, I don't know what in God's name they would have thrown a net over his head and dragged him somewhere. But at the time, none of us laughed harder than we had ever laughed to just see this person who, if I just say the word hirsute, people will know exactly who he was that were around that same table. So that was stands out in my head as one of the goofiest things. And had a woman done it, in a million years, had I come out of there, well, the room would have cleared out if I just come out of my but that stands out as the kind of craziness that can. What other company, what other job can you have where someone just
and have it be appreciated
and laughed? I mean, I still remember it. It's decades already. And sometimes it keeps me up at night because it wasn't a good picture either. It was.
Well, clearly it was indelible.
Yeah, it was indelible.
All right. So last question. What's the best piece of advice you could give to those who are starting out and maybe trying to figure out how to get into the business, break in, or even though you had it a little bit easier than the average person, but what advice would you give someone who's trying to either break in or maybe somebody who's in a little bit and trying to get to the next level?
Well, I was going to say, get lucky. That's helpful. That's helpful. I think know what your strengths are. In the beginning, it took me a while to realize my strength was not the story. It was character, it was funny jokes, dialogue. It wasn't structure. And so maybe just recognize what you struggle with. And in my case, I did want a partner. I appreciated a partner. So that is something that I think if you struggle at all, I would say try that. See what that is. But I also I think if I had a word that, and I didn't do it, I didn't network. I stayed in one place for a very long time because it worked with my life, because my mothering was as important to me and my wifing was as important to me as my career. That if you network and you take classes and you put yourself out there with other people, all those other people go somewhere else. And if you are a good person, and I think that does help, somebody you want to spend the day around the table with, who is that? Who do you want to spend the day? I can give you a list of names of people I do not want to spend 20 minutes with. I think networking to me is a big piece of how you make your way in the business.
Because it's really ultimately not a business about what you know, it's about who you know, yes?
It is. And people move. No show stays on forever, except The Simpsons, it seems. And even there, people have moved on, moved out, and you tend to want to be with the people that work well with you. And because you do spend so much time with them around the table, it's a good thing to just move on when I think just put yourself out there with other people, because if they want to work with you again, they'll work with you again.
Well, I think that's incredibly wise because, again, it is a people business. Even though you have to have the skill and talent to stay there, you need those relationships. It is a relationship industry, far more than working on a factory assembly line or something like that. You really need that relationship. And that's what people frequently don't do. So yeah. I think that, and as you say, for a long time, you didn't develop those relationships. And so I think that's very, very wise advice. Well, this has just been a fantastic hour, and I'm So pleased that you came on the show today.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
And so we've come to the end of today's Story Beat. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to give us a rating or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great Story Beat episodes to you. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.